Amen. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to church. I believe deeply that church is not something that's supposed to be endured. It's something that's supposed to be enjoyed. So I lived in Alabama for a season, and I grew up in Iowa, and they used to give redneck jokes. Anyone ever hear a good redneck joke? Some of you are like, what's a redneck? So I'm going to explain what a redneck is real quick. If people come to your house on a regular and they knock on your door because they think your yard is a yard sale, you might be a redneck. If you've ever cut your grass and found a car, you might be a redneck. If you've ever financed a tattoo, you might be a redneck. 3 more payments and this baby's mine. If you've ever made change in an offering bucket, you might be a redneck. I was planning to only give $20, but all I had was $100, so I made some change in that bucket. I don't recommend you do that. If you've ever seen a sign that said, say no to crack, and you pulled up your pants, you might be a redneck. If you don't have enough Christmas lights to decorate your house, but you did for this, you might be a redneck. So I shared all of those jokes right there just to show you that one picture. So welcome to Vibrant. I love Christmas tree lighting. I'm not a personal fan of doing it myself, but we love to drive around and see everybody else's. So I just wanted to show you some creative things that I've seen over the last couple of years. Some of you are like me, you're like, meh. It did take a lot of work to make it so it stayed on that roof and didn't put holes in his roof, so it's a lot less Matt than he's leading on. Here's another one. Ditto. Like, I'm not even going to try to compete with that one right there. That seems a little bit much. That was tricky. I feel like that belongs on Christmas Vacation or something, because that's next level right there. All right. And when you just want to go real simple, but you want to look like you put a lot of effort into it, it's 1 string of lights and about $50 for the Grinch. And you can have, like, people will talk about your house without any effort. That's probably as far as I'm going to go. Anybody with me? Anybody go all out for Christmas? Yeah. How many of you are like, I want to look like I went all out, but I don't want to go all out? Amen. I don't want to have the expensive all out, but somebody else can? It's good. So we are in a series called God with Us. And Christmas is a time where we remember what this is all about. What is the reason for this season? So it's a part 2 of a 3-week message. So if you missed last week, that's fine. I'll bring you along. But we're looking into how do we experience the presence of God in different seasons? Like, how many of you know there's different seasons? Like, how many of you remember the season of being a kid? Like, you're like, it's so rough being a kid, my mom makes me do chores. So rough being a toddler, they make me do a nap. And now you're like, I'll give anything for a nap. The season of middle school, I call it hell on earth. How many of you are middle schoolers in this room? Any middle schoolers here today? Yeah, that's right. That's right. Actually, most of our middle schoolers are serving right now, and they're like, should I raise my hand and identify the fact that I'm in middle school? But we live in a world of seasons. And we love the mountaintop experience, right? The mountaintop where everything's good, everything's great, life is full. How many of you have ever been on the mountaintop before? How many of you are still on the mountaintop? A little jealous if you are. Some of you are like, yes, I'm still on the mountaintop, Pastor B. We can talk after this. You can pray that over me. That'd be awesome. Last week I talked about the valley. The valley is the place where the battles take place. Today I want to talk about the wilderness. And next week, get ready, I'm gonna talk about the storm. Because sometimes the storm comes in life when you least expect it. Our theme verse, though, for this whole series comes from the beginning, right before the time of the birth of Christ. In Israel, the nation of Israel is under the power of Rome, and life didn't look the way that they hoped it would. How many of you have ever been there before? And to the point where some of them had even lost hope that life could ever look like it once did. And had we gone so far from it that the idea of getting some version of that is impossible. In the midst of Israel being in that place, an angel shows up to Joseph, a man who's engaged to Mary, but she's a virgin and she's pregnant. He knows the kid's not his, and really he doesn't believe the fact that her story could possibly be true. And an angel shows up for Joseph, and he says, look, the virgin, confirming, hey, her story's true, will conceive a child. She'll give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. So when we're in the valley, it's very different than the mountaintop. We enjoy God on the mountaintop, so we get to know him in the valley. That was the summation of last week's message. If you didn't watch it, I encourage you to go back and watch it. But today I want to talk about experiencing God in the wilderness. It's another metaphor that you find in Scripture that has to do with trials, hardship, and wandering. The feelings that exist in a wilderness are dry. Just feels long. Like, is it really going to ever be over? You look into the future and you're like, I don't see an end to this wilderness. Which can lead you to a deep place of a drudging feeling where you don't want to keep going in the journey. And in the middle of the wilderness, you often come to this place in your soul of, I'm not sure what to do next. Have you ever been there? Ever been in the spot where, like, I know that there is a next, but I don't know which next it is. I feel like my options might even be limited or not what I hoped that they would be. And you come to the conclusion and you start asking God this question, or even yourself this question: where is God in the wilderness? Some of you today are like, should I stay in the job that I have, or should I go back to school, which is going to mean I'm going to have to take out student loans, but maybe God has something better for me, but I'm really not sure what to do. You're in the wilderness. If you're asking the question, should I continue to rent but not build equity into a home that's mine, or should I take a faith step of purchasing a home, and is it the right time or is it the wrong time? Is it the right season? You're in the wilderness. If you're in the question of, like, should I keep dating this person, hope for an intended future, or should I call it quits and start over? You're in the wilderness. If you journey into dating again, and you go on a date with her and you find out that the woman is a Karen, you don't know what I'm talking about? And it feels like the last 3 people you've gone on a date with is another one of those Karens, you're in the wilderness. Oftentimes, I believe life can lead us to a place where in the wilderness we feel stuck, paralyzed, and often afraid. The wilderness often follows the mountaintops. Jesus had a mountaintop experience. It was his baptism. Can you imagine being baptized by John the Baptist in the Jordan River? And when he baptizes Jesus in the water and he comes out of the water, it says the heavens opened up. The Spirit of God descended like a dove. There was no dove. So every time we saw the picture that had the dove, there was no dove. It was describing the Spirit of God that was falling on Jesus. And everybody there heard the voice of God speaking over Jesus. This is my Son, whom I love, and whom I'm well pleased. Epic mountaintop moment. And the verse that followed that epic scene was this. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Have you ever looked up at God and said, really? This is where you're leading me to now? I had this great moment. Now I'm here. Maybe you had that friend that betrayed you. You shared something in confidence, and now they've shared it with somebody else, and they shared it with 10 people, and now it's public knowledge, the secret that you've been holding, and you didn't want anyone to know. That's a wilderness. For some of you, you hate your job. You hate it. You look forward to Friday at whatever time or whenever the end of your week is because you can't wait to just be done. For some of you, it's financial pressure. It just seems like it's one thing after the next thing after the next thing, and you come to the place, am I ever going to get out of the financial pressure? Am I ever going to get ahead? For some of you, it might have been a spouse that wasn't honest. Now you're questioning, can I even trust the person I should trust the most? Oftentimes in the wilderness, you find yourself in a place where you are deeply hurting, confused, and why did it happen? In the midst of feeling deeply empty, you feel completely alone. And then you try to explain it to somebody, and no one seems to get it. You know what I'm talking about? You ever shared it with somebody, and they just don't hear you? Like my wife had that moment with me last night. She's like, you're not hearing me. I'm like, I was totally listening. She said, I didn't say you weren't listening. I'm saying you didn't hear me. You didn't get what I was trying to describe. Oftentimes, I think in the wilderness, we try to explain what's in us, and it seems like nobody seems to get it and feel it the way that you do, leaving you in a deeper sense of feeling alone and oftentimes desperate. But when you're in a wilderness, today I want to show you a secret of the purpose that can take place in the midst of the wilderness. And at first, you're not going to believe me. I promise you. When I show you what I'm about to show you, you're going to see what I have there, and you'll be like, I don't know if that could be true for me. But it's true. And it's true for you too. Your deepest need can become a gift if it drives you to depend on God. Today I want to share a story about the most famous prophet of the Old Testament. His name was Elijah. Elijah had incredible mountaintop experience. God used Elijah in a massive way. But Israel was being led by a guy named King Ahab. And King Ahab has been trying to shut down Elijah for a long time. But there was an experience on top of Mount Carmel, which I'll tell you about in a minute, where a bunch of prophets had gotten killed. And King Ahab tells his wife Jezebel about what happened on the mountain. And she looks at her husband and says, if you don't kill him, I will. Like Jezebel is a Karen on steroids. Jezebel is a wicked woman. Jezebel is a woman you do not want to get caught in her path. Jezebel sends word to Elijah, by this time tomorrow, I will have you killed. Now, let's look into the story that took place before this. King Ahab sent an army of 50 people to kill Elijah, or at least arrest him. Elijah calls fire from heaven, and the army gets consumed. A second army comes, same thing. King Ahab sends armies. Elijah's fine. One woman threatens him, and he falls apart. He goes into a deep depression and a state of desperation. Have you ever met that woman before? This is not your moment to look at her. She's in the room. He just totally blew it. Anyone else seeing some family on the holidays? So after this had happened and he gotten word from Jezebel, Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba, now time out, this is funny. From where he was to Beersheba was 100 miles on foot. Run, Forrest, run, right? Mom always said life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. That has nothing to do with the message. Let's come back to Beersheba. Elijah travels 100 miles, and he left his servant there while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. If you're a parent of teenagers, or you were a parent of teenagers, or maybe you're about to be a parent of teenagers, I'm going to give you a warning. At some point, you're going to have it up to here, where you're going to look at that kid in the face and you're like, I brought you into this world and I can take you out. You'll get there, I promise. Any parents of teenagers in the room? Yeah, he's like, yes, I do. He's looking at him right now. For some of you, it's a boss. They're passive-aggressive, they're narcissistic, or maybe just overly demanding, and you just about had it, but you feel so stuck. For others, it might be you've been making up ground financially, and then the car breaks down, the dishwasher stops working, or like what happened with us when we're trying to get out of debt. About 10 years ago, our daughter Eden, who's now 11, but back then she was a lot younger, she decided that she was going to wash her hands in the sink with toilet paper, at which it clogs the sink. And when you've got a 3-year-old and all of a sudden it gets quiet, you should be concerned. But when you hear quiet, but you hear water running, you should be real concerned. And we walked in on Eden. She said, my hands are so clean. And there's water pouring over the sink. The entire bathroom is flooded. And we send our son Levi to go get some towels out of the basement. And he comes up without the towels. Like, where's the towels? He's like, you might want to go down there first. You might be in a wilderness. If you make a special dinner for your family and they eat it in 3 minutes, and then they leave the dishes at the table, and you might just become a Jezebel. You might be in the wilderness. Like, you can handle a lot, but there's always just that one thing, and it's usually not a big thing, that just pushes you over the edge. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody ever been there before? So Elijah's there. And he came and sat under a broom bush and sat down under it, and he prayed that he might die. This is the man that saw God do the incredible, the impossible. I have had enough, Lord. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. This is the same guy that stood before King Ahab and said, because of the way that you're living and you're leading this nation, I am praying that God would make it so the rain doesn't happen again, and there is a drought in the land for 3 years. For 3 years, King Ahab is on the run chasing Elijah, full force. Elijah, while hiding, God sends ravens, birds, to bring food to Elijah. In the middle of this 3-year journey, he comes across a dead child and raises them back to life. My favorite story of Elijah, this is hilarious, by the way. Elijah shows up, and there's this massive worship gathering for false gods, and he says, let's have a standoff. How about we get some bowls, we put the fire underneath it, and you go first, and we'll let you call fire down from heaven, and if your God lights his own sacrifice, your God's real. And then once it doesn't happen for you, I'll go and I'll show you that my God's real. There's 850 prophets of this false god, and there's one Elijah. There's one believer. So if you've ever felt alone in a massive group of people, you understand Elijah. So these 850 prophets and thousands of people are calling down fire. They're jumping up and down. They actually start cutting themselves with stones. And Elijah's like, maybe you need to jump higher or cut a little bit deeper. Maybe your God is relieving himself on the toilet, and you should wait until he comes back. He's mocking them. He's like, all right, this is enough. It's my turn. He says, I want you to get a whole bunch of water. I want you to soak the wood and soak the bowls. They're like, that doesn't catch on fire. He's like, I know. And he calls down fire from heaven, and the sacrifice burns, and thousands of people see that there is a God that loves them and is not against them. The false prophets are destroyed. Afterwards, he goes to bring relief to Israel. He gets on his knees, and he now starts asking God for rain. He sends a servant out to see, is there a cloud in the sky? He's like, no clouds. Elijah keeps praying. Sends him a second time, no clouds. Okay. Third time, hey, there was a cloud. This cloud was about the size of a man's hand. Elijah's like, get up, it's getting ready to rain. And Israel gets rain for the first time in years. Elijah's life has been marked by the provision and the protection of God. And then a really angry woman makes a threat, and he falls apart. And when you look into the person of Elijah, and you read the story that takes place right here, you see he's exhausted. Like, maybe you can relate to where Elijah was. I've just had it up to here. I don't think I can go any further. And the feeling that you would describe is this: depleted. I mean, people all the time, how you doing? I'm busy, tired. If you were just tired and not depleted. You could take a physical rest. You could take a nap, and it'd fix it. But you're depleted. See, what Elijah needed and what he's about to experience is a spiritual replenishment that can only come from an experience with God. David found himself in a wilderness, and he wrote one of the most famous psalms of all times, one that we read it and it speaks to our soul. He said, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He restores my soul." And in this moment, God doesn't preach a sermon to Elijah. "Where's your faith? Remember what I did for you?" He doesn't rebuke Elijah. Watch this. It says, "At once an angel touched him and says, 'Get up and eat.' He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He drank and then laid down again." For some of you, what you need is a spiritual rest. That you would experience the be still and know that I am God. Being still doesn't mean a lack of activity. It means, we talked about last week, you dig a well. You make space in your life for God to fill it. And Elijah did this. And it says, the angel of the Lord came back a second time. Are you grateful that we serve a God of second chances? Because he didn't get it right the first time? And touched him and says, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." And he got up, and he ate, and he drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God, getting ready to have the greatest experience of his life. But before it happened, he went into a cave and he spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to him, "What are you doing here?" He wasn't talking about the physical cave. He was talking about the condition of Elijah's soul. How did you get in this desperate place? How did you get in this state of depression? How did you get here? Now, this is God. God's not wondering what his answer is going to be. He knows how he got here. And for some of you today, that's the question God's asking you. Not because he doesn't know how you got here, but he's wanting you to articulate, how did you get here? And you hear a message like this, you need spiritual replenishment, and you're like, what good is that going to do? In the midst of that, you're lying awake at night, concerned and worried and anxious and unsure of what to do. Should I go left? Should I go right? Should I make this decision? Should I have this conversation? Should I just hold it in? Should I ever tell the truth? I don't know what to do. And Elijah, in that moment, brings out his whiny voice. Have you ever had whiny voice with God? I've had whiny voice with God. I do whiny voice with God probably more than I should. And he replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant. They've torn down your altars, and they put prophets to death with the sword. I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too." Now, if I'm God, which I'm not, I'd be terrible at being God. Ask my wife. If I was God, I would tell Elijah, "Do you remember what I did for you? Remember the ravens, the bread, the water, the jug of water that just appeared?" But that's not how God treats Elijah. In the midst of Elijah's deepest pain, led to his greatest experience of his life. God meets him in his weakness, gives him rest and healing. And he experienced that his deepest need became a gift when it drove him to depend on God. The Lord said, Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord wasn't in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord wasn't in the fire. The Lord wasn't in the earth, wind, and fire. Earth, wind, and fire. For all of you under the age of 30, it's fine. It's fine. God isn't in any of it. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. God didn't come in the remarkable. He came in the ordinary. God was in the whisper. It's an invitation that when you get overwhelmed by the stresses of life, when you get overcome by the anxiety of the unknown, why does God's voice seem so quiet? Shouldn't it be spectacular and powerful? If God really wants me to know him, experience, trust him, why does God whisper? At the very beginning it says that God spoke, "Let there be light." 4 words. Today, scientists say the universe is expanding at an incredible rate. New stars and galaxies being formed before their very eyes. God spoke 4 words however long ago, and those words are still producing. Imagine what God could do with 1 word spoken into you. Why this soft, gentle whisper? Because he's close. The devil shouts lies. You'll never make it. You're not enough. They'll always reject you. They'll always spread these lies. You'll never have what it takes. You're stuck. And God whispers truth. Because he's calling you closer. Because he's with you. Because he's close. Saying, I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. One of my favorite Psalms said, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. Some of you need to experience that today. And saves those who are crushed in spirit. David said, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil because you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Jesus said, my sheep know my voice. They know my gentle whisper. Why does God whisper? Because he's close. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, if I'm on the mountaintop, God's there. If I make my bed in hell and I live in the consequences of my own poor decisions, God's there. if I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, if I get to a land I don't even know where I am or what to do, it's so strange and so new, and I'm not sure I even wanted to get here. Even though your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast. How close is God if he can hold your hand? This last year, a couple girls who I deeply love came into my life. And I asked them to sit in the front today. They've experienced more loss and more pain than anyone should. And as I prepared this message, I thought of you so many times. God's close. He'll hold your hand. He'll walk you through. Your deepest need becomes a gift when it drives you to depend on God. God didn't make it happen. He never wanted it to happen. But he's there. On the lonely nights, when you feel alone in your pain and you're not sure how to feel, God's there. He's close, even when it doesn't feel like it. In every step of your journey, he'll walk right beside you. And he'll walk you through because he's close. My wife, Jonna, has struggled with pain her entire life because of her hips. And she's told me that she's asked for years, why me? Why could I never take a step without it hurting? Why can't I pick up my kids without it causing pain? This last year, she said something that struck it in me. She said, I wouldn't want this for anybody else. And I certainly wouldn't want to go through it again. But I think God chose me for this. She said, I meet people all the time that live in pain. And she said, there's so many times when I felt alone in mine. And I'm learning that God has purpose in my pain. Come to the conclusion that I'd rather be in the wilderness with God than to be on the mountaintop without him. Your deepest need becomes a gift when it drives you to depend on God. Whispers because he's close. When the nation of Israel hadn't got it right and hope was dwindling and God seemed distant, a virgin conceived a child and God came close. Father, right now I pray, as I think there's many people here and even watching online are going to watch throughout the week that are living a wilderness. And the pain is so deep. And the worry is so present. And Father, right now I pray, God, that you would open our ears to hear your voice, to hear your whisper. God, that you would give us faith in the wilderness to believe that you are the one who holds us close. That in the lonely moments, it's you who grabs our hand. So God, would you meet us in our deepest need? And would you use it in this world to bring hope? In Jesus' name, amen.